there's a kind of risk in having children, and it's similar to the risk that entrepreneurs take. And we know that an attitude of confidence in God's providence is actually a very important ingredient to the entrepreneurial mindset, taking prudent risks and kind of, it's not like recklessness. You just assume everything will be fine, but there's a kind of, you tell God your plans and then, he can act. So we know that. So I think this, again, I found this a beautiful parallel between entrepreneurship and family building, that what you really want to encourage in young people is a willingness to take on prudent risks and to know that kind of like in modern parlance, like God has your back.
Welcome to Prosper, everyone, the podcast where we talk with fascinating people about real-life intersection of faith and business. I'm your host, Andreas Wittmer, joined as always by my colleague, Rebecca Teddy. We're coming to you from the Ciocca Center, the Entrepreneurship Center of the Catholic University of America. Today, we welcome to the show Dr. Catherine Pakaluk, who's a longtime friend of mine and a colleague of mine as well. Catherine earned her PhD in economics from Harvard University. She teaches courses here in political economy here at the Bush School, and she's the winner of the Novak Award. I think that's given out by the Acton Institute.
Yeah. She's also a working mom and the author of Hannah's Children, which is a portrait of some really overlooked but really interesting women, college-educated women who are choosing to have large families in the face of demographic decline. So, Catherine Pakaluk, welcome to Prosper.
Thanks. It's delightful to be with you.
It's very delightful. And in full transparency, we've been very good friends for many, 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 many years. So,
we have. We could occupy all of this podcast telling old stories.
Yeah. And you know that I'm a super fan of everything you do. But here I want to jump right in and first of all, congratulate you because Hannah's Children, that's your latest book. It's gotten such critical reception. And interestingly, and not surprisingly, given you're the one who's writing, not just in the pro-family circles or so, but you seem to have pretty much been reviewed by everyone and everybody in every sphere of society. That's really cool.
And in really, really thoughtful, engaged, positive reviews, even from very secular reviewers, it's been really interesting. So,
yeah. So the best thing is to just jump in, introduce Hannah's Children to the audience, if you would.
Sure. Just to first to repeat what you've said, and I've been so grateful and excited about the engagement. I wrote the book very much for the general public, and I really did hope that it would be received and read by people, let's say outside of the pro-family or the pro-life space. And it has been exactly that. So it's been really wonderful and really exciting. So just to jump in, this book is a portrait of the people all around the country. So American women I sampled from who, against this backdrop of declining birth rates have been having children anyway. So I sometimes say they're the women who are immune from falling birth rates. And for some people, they don't know that there even is a group of people that are still having children. So what I like to say sometimes is there's all this bad news about falling birth rates, but there are these people all over the country of different faiths and some who don't have faith at all, who are still choosing to have children in spite of what the secular trends say. And so isn't it interesting to find out why? Why are they doing this? What does it mean to them? And what does it perhaps tell us about, on the one hand, the future of American prosperity, which is, of course, I think the theme of this podcast in some broad sense, and also about the kinds of things that might help to turn this thing around.
You focused, didn't you, on college-educated women? Why particularly? Why college-educated women exclusively?
Yeah, great question. So I like to say right at the beginning, not because college education is for me any kind of norm or the type of thing that I'd like to say, you're not good enough without a college education. A lot of people have asked that. And of course, I'm I'm highly supportive of people doing other things besides college. But the reason is because if we were to look broadly, both in the United States and around the globe, we would see that women's education is this it's highly predictive of how many children women will have. And so highly predictive that a lot of policymakers think it's the most important thing you can do to reduce birth rates is to get women into higher education. And you might say, well, who would want to reduce birth rates? Well, actually, now for many, many decades, the predominant scare or concern among the global elites has been too many births. And so I assume that most of your listeners will know that. But so the whole idea was like, if you were looking at a country in Africa and you thought the birth rates are too high, this was what happened with the president of France. You might say, like, let's get the girls into school. So basically, what I was interested in doing was showing, kind of revealing the truths and the non-truths about this correlation, right? Is it really true that if you have a lot of education, there's no way you could imagine life with children? And what are the kinds of trade-offs? So I really wanted to kind of go for the crux. Like, here's the collision course that looks like the collision course with education. And that was the reason. It's a small study, so of course you can't interview everybody. But that was the reason.
And so it is a study. You're a scientist, and it is a study, but it's also an exploration of the theme. And you met with people personally and so on. Maybe can I ask you? You yourself are a mother. How many children do you have?
I have 8 children.
You have 8. So you can interview yourself. You qualify.
Yes, that's right.
I don't want to derail the thing, but maybe the genesis of your book has something to do with that interaction between you and the president of France.
Yeah, that was that happened on Twitter back when it was still Twitter, and I had actually just begun this project where I thought, well, I'm going to go and interview women who have children, who have a lot of education, and I'm going to see what makes them tick and what they're up to, and so around that same time, President Macron had said something at a UN assembly where he said, considering the development of Africa, let's just get the girls into school, because who's ever seen women who are very, very well educated who still have, 6, 7, 8 children. And it was just like, dramatic flair that he says, show me a woman who still has a lot of kids after getting educated. And so I thought, well, I'd like to bring attention to this research project, and I don't know anything about Twitter back in those days. I'm just thinking like, I'm, my little corner, tweeting things. And so I just posted a photo of myself in a graduation gown with 6 children. And I encouraged other people with a hashtag to follow suit. Like, if he says, show me the woman, here's a postcard. So I did that. And I woke up in the morning and went, oh no, like what did I do? Because, it was probably hundreds of thousands of people around the world had picked up on this hashtag and this idea. And it was actually really charming. So there were all these, it was really just it was photos, people posting photos of themselves in graduation gowns or with their children, posting their credentials. It was very cute. But it was
beautiful. And right away that you're onto something. I mean, this is if nothing, this is such a validation of, not a scientific validation, but an emotional and physical, real life validation for the interest you're taking and to shine a light on it.
Yes, that's right. The follow-up tweet from years ago, I said to the president, not that he responded, I said, I'll send you a copy of my book when I'm finished. And of course, I haven't done that. But it definitely taught me that there's a real need, that there are many, many people who feel unseen. I think this was actually the main thing. Was I thought these people were unseen, but I didn't realize how much they felt unseen. And so, to your point, it was encouraging to me, because it was years until I would finish the project. And at that stage, I thought, well, this is very encouraging that there are so many people eager to tell their stories, and not in a judgmental way. Like, this is the choice we made. Let me share with you the reasons I made this choice. And looking back on that Twitter storm, it was like 99.9% positive, which was, you can't always say that.
That's something that I think, actually, in looking at your personal Twitter feed, X feed now, one of the things that strikes me as true, but also it's striking, how many people who read Hannah's Children and love it, or even are just interacting with you you've been on every podcast imaginable, it feels like. Every time I look at my podcast list, the guest is going to be, that's my friend Catherine's going to be on.
You're tired of it at this point.
Well, no, never, because it's such good news and it's so encouraging. But what everybody always points out is how you really are gentle and not judgmental. And I think my own experience is that sometimes in the pro-family crowd, we can be a little too defensive and not don't listen enough to people's actual needs and the actual situations where they are. And I think that it's a great gift of yours that you do see people. But having said that, what did you learn in interviewing these 55 women? You had some intuitions, and what was surprising and what was confirmed?
Yeah. So, I think the thing that was confirmed was, the intuition here was that people aren't having these families by accident. So, when we think about the kind of work that you do, entrepreneurship theory, we think about the way in which really the economy can't be planned, and that social order can't be planned apart and aside from the mystery and the dignity of human choice and human action. So this is something that's deep in my training and my heart as an economist. So my hunch going in was that if you're going to talk to a bunch of people who've chosen very deliberately to have large families in the face of a social trend that goes the other way, they're probably going to have pretty interesting reasons. You're not going to hear a story of we don't know how that happened, or gosh, oh shucks, where did they all come from? Right. Or there's just, we just belong to a cult where everyone does this and we don't really have any good reasons for it. But, now I'm kind of touching on the types of things people might have assumed, people who don't know what's going on, or worse, they're these are all backwards religious people who don't want to get with the program. So this is what was confirmed for me was I thought, well, I think if we go talk to people in this position, we'll find a rich and interesting story of human agency, participation, a kind of the mystery of co-creation, right? Because the kind of thing that we think about in the economy is no less true in the family. In fact, the family is constituted, it's like the economy, it's a kind of natural institution. And there's a whole bunch of really beautiful analogies between the family and the natural economy. And so I thought, well, my hunch here going into this as an economist is all of the action is going to be in the human heart. And we really want to uncover those stories of purpose, the narratives, the motive and the meaning is what I said. So that was confirmed. I thought, okay, I didn't go into it and kind of walk away and think, oh, well, they're just a bunch of technology non-adopters, people who aren't willing to use birth control. But let me tell you, even since publishing the book, a lot of people have said to me, isn't that just what this is about? Which is why I very specifically had to address that question. So that's what was confirmed. And I'm not actually telling you all the reasons, but I'm telling you, it was confirmed for me that this is really a great, childbearing and family formation is as much an area of, we'll say human excellence. It's worthy of study in that sense. Just like we would say, mountain climbers, what are they doing that for? And so you're oh, I never really thought about that. What would make somebody want to climb Mount Everest? I don't really know. And then you dig into it. You're actually, it's pretty interesting. There's all kinds of, I don't want to climb Mount Everest myself, but now that I've watched and studied and listened to all these testimonies, I can see why somebody might want to do that. And that right there is the thing that I thought I could communicate to people who aren't, or don't consider themselves pro-family, maybe don't want an above average number of children. But I wanted to communicate to them that this is a sphere of human excellence and that people may choose it for perfectly rational reasons. So that was what was confirmed. The thing that surprised me, and I'll try to say this briefly, is I was going out I knew I was talking to a lot of women of serious faith, but of many different religions. And what I think surprised me most, and it really hit me when I was still in the middle of the process of interviewing people, was how much across different faiths, Jewish, Mormon, Evangelical, Baptist, Catholic, Anglican, how much these women shared a kind of common language for how they would describe what they were up to and its value. So they really described in very similar terms this language of children are a blessing. They're kind of wealth. God says in the scriptures that children will bless you, even if they don't feel like a blessing immediately. And we really believe that, and our experience has confirmed it. And, even if we're not ready or able to have another child now or ever, all things being equal, we would want another child because it's a kind of wealth, like having children, right? And this sounds very biblical. This sounds very, like it's coming right out of the Abrahamic scriptures, right? God says that he really wants to bless us. The women would say, I really believe that God wants to bless us. And the three big blessings that God may send us would be children and health and prosperity. And that the biggest of these is children. And we should pray for more children. We should want more children because it's really going to be blessings. And so kind of putting words on that, number one, which was amazing. And then number two, to discover across all of these different faiths, to find this kind of common language. And it really just jumped off the page at me. So I thought, like, what is this? What is this Orthodox Jewish woman in Wisconsin have anything to share with this Mormon lady in Seattle? Like, they don't have the same preachers. They listen to completely different stuff. And here they are describing what it looks like to cooperate with God in accepting a child in like almost identical language. I thought, wow, like that's amazing. Got to write that down.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But you did also talk to some people who did not have any particular faith commitment. Did you find a commonality in the way that they also approach child rearing, or a big difference, or no?
So just to put numbers on it, because it's not a big sample, so I know the numbers. It's funny. The least religious. So everybody in my actual sample would have checked the box as being having a religion that they followed, but the very least devout person in my sample was Jewish, and she said she and her husband. She said explicitly, the having children is separate from the Jewish part. Like, we're not she said, our children blessings, hell no. Like, she sort of, this is not the motive. Like, motive is not. And then she said, well, like, in a way they are, but this is not the motive, right? She really wanted to separate her family decisions from her faith. And so I kind of put her closer to the secular bucket, I know that there are more women with no faith at all out there who've made these similar choices. They're just not the majority. But what I found that in Lauren's case, and these are all pseudonyms, but in Lauren's case, she still shared that common feature where there's a real reason for this. And in her case, it was because her husband really wanted a big family. And I didn't interview her husband, so I don't know why he did, but she said it was, for personal reasons. So he really wanted a big family, and she felt that it was the best thing she could give him was to go along with that. It was a beautiful story. But it certainly was a kind of exception to the rational reason being a belief that children are blessings, that the intrinsic value of children. But it fit the sample in the sense it was still a story of human action and choice, and a very deliberate picture of co-creation. Yeah.
Yeah. And the gift, like she also uses the gift language, except she's giving the gift to her husband.
That's right.
It's the same principle. How did you choose them, and how old, like, did you try to, like, you could have talked to my mom. She had 8 children at the end. 6 of them lived, and so on. So how many children did you have to that you would talk to the woman and interview her? And did you try to do an age bracket?
Yeah. No, there was no age bracket, because I was looking, I made the cutoff 5 children. Now, again, that's also arbitrary. I was just looking for people who were doing something really different from normal, but I really wanted people who would have described their families as purposeful. I could have drawn the line at 3. I mean, 3 is above the national average now, or 4. I went to 5 because I thought this is, I'm not going to be interviewing people all day long. And I really want to know what a pro-child motive looks like. What is that? So I was like, well, if we're going to describe a thing, just go for the thing, don't worry about, like we would say in statistics, like, don't worry about, don't have a lot of borderline cases where there might be confounders. Just go for the real thing. And I figured, like, this isn't the last time I'll do this project. So I could go out and interview, so 5. So that's the simple answer. 5 was the cutoff. And when you do 5, that ends up that you really hardly can interview anybody under 30 because there's just not that much time, right? So, yeah. So I think that maybe the youngest person in our sample might have been, like right on the border of 30, maybe 31. We didn't have an upper age limit, but I think the way we were sampling, we were looking for people through moms groups. And, by and large, like moms groups aren't populated with women who are like at this point grandmas. And so we recruited by going into moms groups and church groups, places we knew that families congregate in different cities. And we hung a flyer. We basically posted a flyer recruiting people. To your point, Andreas, I could have interviewed like my 50 best friends. I know a lot of people like this, but the goal was to make this a real study and go interview people where I didn't know what they were going to say. And so that's how we did it. We invited people to fill out a survey if they wanted to participate. And then what we did is we looked at about 500 or 600 people applied from around the country. We had 10 different locations, and we chose from among that 500 or 600. In order to have a balanced sample, you want people of different faiths and different backgrounds, different zip codes. You are actually looking to see, can you talk to people who are wealthy, talk to people who are not wealthy. So different demographic backgrounds, so that you're not getting a sample that's, too, it's easy for all these people. They all have lots of money, or the other way around, right? So you actually do go in and handpick your sample to be, we'll say properly or appropriately diverse. And that's kind of how it's done with these things. Cause the job of the project is not to do a statistically, representative sample. That's not the job of this kind of work.
I'm going to jump tracks just slightly. Obviously, we're still in the realm of Hannah's children, but I think, after decades and decades of the cultural elite kind of beating the drum of overpopulation, I think the word has kind of spread that actually we face a tremendous birth dearth. And this is a problem. And there have been a number of efforts in the West, especially I'm thinking about European countries, to kind of try different incentives to get the population to have more children. And none of that has actually worked. And I think you are theorized that it can't work. Can you tell us a little bit about, well, let me not put words in your mouth, but tell us a little bit about that and what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So I view it as the research that I did and the stories that I did. I'm attempting to explain why it hasn't worked rather than forecasting that it could never work. Although I think it certainly points to that. So what I basically say is like, look, these things haven't worked. Various countries have tried, we'll say, pronatalist policy for, 40 or 50 years, actually. And we don't have any track record of success there. What we do see is that if you put a big bonus on a baby, like you give people like a big fat tax break the year they have a kid, or you send them a subsidy check or other types of these, we'll call them direct incentives. What really happens is what we call it's like a flypaper effect, where people go, oh, I'm planning to have 2 kids. I don't know how long this bonus is going to be available. Let's just kind of have our kids now because that looks like a nice fat bonus. So what you do see in the data usually is like a little bump initially. You go like, oh, wow, all of a sudden there's like a clustering of births and it looks like this policy is successful. If you wait a little bit longer, what you see is actually then there's like kind of like a slowdown. And what you see is this births that are retimed. They're not extra births. You haven't caused anybody to want 4 that used to want 2. You just cause them to kind of go after the subsidy. But why is that shocking, right? So now here's the story in a nutshell. The costs of having a child, of course, they include some cash outlays over time. But what I was able to uncover in these interviews is that the real cost, like the cost to women and to couples, and as soon as you say it, you realize this is true. It's massive because the real cost is the personal, the hours, the sleeplessness, the times that you spend. You completely change your lifestyle. It's like joining the military. Here I am talking to a former military man. It's like joining the military. It's much more like that than, like going out to dinner. It's a 20, but we could say 20 plus years of very intense time, and then a lifetime of involvement in another person. So obviously, look, tremendously valuable, tremendously rewarding it can be. But those are the costs. They go years and years and years. It's a complete lifestyle change. The thought that, a few bucks could kind of make a difference one way or the other. Whereas, look, there's a lot of other things, like how many eggs I consume in a year. Like we're thinking about eggs because eggs are expensive right now, or how much gasoline I buy in a year. If you total that up, your budget for gasoline over the course of a year, it's not that far off. Where if I'm a policymaker and I could double the price of gas, or I could raise it by 20%, I could get you to cut back on your gas consumption. We know we can do that. But really the problem here, it's not that people don't respond to incentives. I think they do. It's that the costs that have to be overcome are so huge and they're so personal and they're not commensurate with money. Meaning, like, if somebody has to give up a music career to stop and have kids for a few years, can you put a price tag on that? Maybe not. I mean, if you did, it would be a huge number, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, not the kind of little throwaway packages that we have been able to consider. So that's kind of in a nutshell. It's that to do this thing, you really have to be internally motivated, because it's very costly personally. And just to wrap that up, I looked recently at this. It turns out it's very difficult for countries to incentivize people to join the military. And so I didn't think of it when I was writing the book, but that's probably the best example. If you could just put a bonus on joining the military and then get people to respond, we would be doing that. And in fact, we are doing that. There's really big bonuses to enlist in the military, and there's still a shortage of people enlisting in the military. This is why countries who feel that, military service is absolutely vital to their national security have to resort to mandatory military service. Well, obviously, like in the realm of children, that's a horrifying thought, right? Like it's a horrifying thought to think about like mandatory production of children. And yet, I promise you, we're going to start hearing really strange things like that going forward.
Yikes. Well, let's pick up on that after the break. We're going to just take a quick moment to acknowledge a sponsor. Did you know that family businesses account for 2/3 of America's GDP and are responsible for creating 6 in 10 jobs in the United States? That's right. Family enterprises like yours are the backbone of our economy, the heart of our communities, and the keepers of legacies that span generations. We think about family business differently at Catholic University's Bush School of Business. That's why we created the Family Business Consortium. Just as the family is the first and essential cell of human society, family business is an indispensable part of a flourishing economy. We know that running a family business isn't just about the bottom line. It's about balancing Sunday dinner conversations with boardroom decisions, preserving your family's values while innovating for the future, and building something meaningful for the next generation. Think of us as your extended family in business. We connect you with top industry experts who understand your unique challenges, whether you're looking to grow while staying true to your values, managing the delicate balance of family dynamics and business decisions, or planning your succession. At the Family Business Consortium, we've created a community of peers who truly get it. They've sat in your chair, faced similar decisions, and found ways to thrive while keeping family at the core of their success. We host 2 free full-day seminars annually, available both in person on our gorgeous campus in Washington, D.C., and online. Our next gathering is Friday, March 21st, 2025, and we'd love to have you join us. Our mission is simple: to help generations of family businesses like yours grow in every sense of the word, professionally, personally, and purposefully. Because when family businesses thrive, communities prosper. Find out more in the show notes to the podcast or at familybusinessconsortium.org. That's familybusinessconsortium.org.
Welcome back, everybody. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Catherine Pakaluk, PhD, author of Hannah's Children, and one of our colleagues here at the Bush School. Hannah's Children is a book of stories, in a way, and I wonder, Catherine, if you have 1 or 2 favorite stories from your interviews to share with us. You talked about this Jewish lady who talked about having children, and maybe something, your favorite part or a favorite story that you heard from one of them.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll go ahead and recount the opening story from the Jewish lady. I think it's a great story, and then I'll tell you one from the end of the book. The Jewish woman whose name is Hannah in the book, and she's kind of the book is named for her in a sense, and as well as for the biblical Hannah. She has a great story. She says she never wanted children. She went to a secular college, and after college, spent years trying to find herself. We probably all know somebody like this. Somewhere along the way, she moved to Hawaii and grew dreadlocks and practiced transcendental meditation. And in this process of transcendental meditation, became introduced to the idea of infinity, and spent a lot of time through her meditation trying to connect with infinity in this very abstract sense. And that didn't really do it for her. And then at some point, she was, ethnically Jewish. She'd been raised in a pretty secular Jewish household in the States. And a friend said, well, I'm going to go to Israel. So she said, all right, I'm going to go to Israel too. And then she went to Israel, and one thing led to another. She met a very charismatic rabbi in Israel who had a group of young people kind of following him around. And in that group of young people was also her husband. And people said, you guys should get together because you both have dreadlocks. She said, we were both like totally off the wall. And so people, naturally kind of matched them up. Anyway, they did end up getting married. And she talks about how, ultimately she says, well, yeah, we became persuaded from knowing this rabbi, that, having children is something, very important for us as Jewish women. And then she said I realized at this point that all of that searching when I was looking for infinity, I realized that was it, that actually having children is a way to connect to infinity and to be part of this chain of infinity going back all the way to our ancestors and forward to our descendants. And she just, as she told it to me, and I was sitting there, I thought, my goodness, I'm so glad I have the recorder rolling. This is such an amazing story. And she describes later, she was really charming. She was a very unorganized person. So is her husband. She says, having 7 kids was for them like something they never could have imagined doing, but there they were. So it's a great story. And it kind of demonstrated how much you don't have to grow up wanting a big family or thinking it's great to be the kind of person that might, through some chain of interesting events, become converted to that idea. So she was incredibly memorable. I've got a lot of quotes from her in the book. There's another story, which is hard for me to tell without sort of breaking down. So I'm going to try to not do that. But it's such a good story. I know I should get more comfortable with that. Lord knows my travels in person, I often share this story, and it's like just sort of. But there was a woman named Rosalie, who's a Filipino woman on the West Coast. She was in the greater Los Angeles area, and when we interviewed her, she had 9 children, and she tells the story of her 7th baby, and he had a chromosomal abnormality. He was born with a deletion and an addition, and she says it's very uncommon. So it's not a normal chromosomal disorder, but very uncommon. And she said, like when he was born, the doctor said, there's a lot of things he'll never do. He'll never live a normal life. And, okay, so she was prepared for this. And the whole first year of his life, she said, I was mostly in the hospital. And the children had to come in, but they had to really kind of fend for themselves. Dad was working, and they would come in. She said, and she tells these great stories about how her kids kind of learn all these medical things because they're coming along to the x-rays and they're coming along. And she said, but then what happened is we went home, and as we left the hospital, we had to get therapy for the little guy. And the doctors would say, like month after month, the baby's improving, but we don't think it's the therapist. Like what is happening here, like in your house? And she says, well, the therapists usually give us homework, like flip the baby over, to strengthen his muscles. She says, well, whatever the homework is from the therapist, I tell my children, this is the homework. I put it on the wall. And as the children go near the baby, they do the homework. They flip the baby. And so she said, like, whatever the therapists do once a week, we do it every single day, and all the children help. And so she explains how, before there were even any more children, her grown children were this great source of assistance. So this is amazing. And then she describes how her grown children become better because they they give themselves to the baby. And it's really great. And already you're like, okay, this is too much. This is amazing. And then she says, well, and then I got pregnant with my eighth. And you're like, wait, you have an eighth? And she said, and then people slandered me. And they said, what business do you have having, you have this special needs child with so much that he needs from everybody, and it costs so much money, and everybody's already helping you. That's very selfish to have another baby. And she said, but I knew that God wouldn't send me another baby if it weren't for a good purpose. And so she says, well, she had this baby. She said, number 8 comes along. And up until that point, her disabled baby didn't eat. He didn't make any noise, and he didn't really move. And she said, but then there's this baby, and this disabled baby, he's like 18 months old, and he sees this little baby. And she said, well, then he sees this other baby. He wants to get to the baby. So this disabled baby is like trying to move because he really wants to get to this little baby. And then he sees the little baby like putting food in his mouth. So he wants to do the same. And she says, they told me like he has this diagnosis. He's never going to want to do these things. But because of this baby who people said, you have no business having a baby, he gets this will to live. He's like a will to eat and a will to move. It's like, that's magic. That's like amazing. And then she finishes it up and she says, and then when baby 9 comes along, he still wasn't standing. He wasn't walking, but this baby. So, you can see where this goes. Just completely amazing, inspiring, beautiful story.
There's a lot of this, how should I say this, the chastisement or the social critique of women doing this. I don't think I ever told you, but so I'm in a way, the 7th of 8 births or children. 2 of them died, one before me and one after me. And my mother was chastised. My mother had to change her doctor because he wouldn't see her anymore. She said, the doctor said, you should not be pregnant again. I'm not going to treat you. And so she had to change. This is in the 60s, huh? And, well, and I like to say, well, then I came along. I mean, I'm certainly happy that's but it's also today at 90 years old. And this is why I asked you a bit about the age of the women, that it would be so beautiful for you to talk to my mom, I tell you, she would cry through the whole time that you talk with her, and for what you do and admiring what you're doing, both in your personal life, but also in bringing this to the fore, because this is a woman who fought for this, who stood up, and made this work. But also the end of the story, of course, there's no end to the story, but later in life, my mom is in a home, in an assisted living home. And you know that my mother never eats lunch alone because she has like 15 grandchildren and like just as many great-grandchildren. And she's the envy of everybody in this home because she never eats lunch alone because somebody's always there. And there is a when you say blessing of the children, many people don't think there has to be a blessing right then and there, and there is in many ways there is, even though it's stressful. But did you see some of these long term, and did they talk to you about these long term things? Did they have the perspective of my mom, who's over 90 years old?
Yes. Yes, I did. So I didn't give you the other end. So the oldest woman in my sample was 70. So she was well past her childbearing years. But then I talked to a lot of women who were like in their late 40s and early 50s. And although they weren't yet in the place where your mom is, and thank you for sharing that. It's really such a great image. What I heard, and it was so common that I wrote it down. I found that women in their 50s and 60s that were in my sample, and even their late 40s, I found this recurring theme where, reflecting on their childbearing years, they would say things looking back like, if only I could have had one more. Like, I would have had one more. And I wasn't probing for that. It was like the kind of thing that would come out when they would sort of survey the past. It was like they had just told you how difficult it was to have children when they were in their 20s or their 30s, the things that they endured, the sacrifices they made, the way in which they had to get themselves into a different mindset if they hadn't grown up that way. But that at the end, looking back, like to a woman, it was like, man, if I could have squeezed in one more, I would have done it. And just that overwhelming sense, like, this isn't just worth it. This was like worth it 100-fold. And so, I think that, like, they would be like your mom when she's 90, it's like that real, and at that point, women were saying, it's like the tears are coming. It was as if it was like all gratitude at that point, as if they just had nothing to say except like gratitude for the gift of their children.
Beautiful. Catherine, say a little bit, if you would. We've touched on it already, but it really is difficult. It really is expensive and many other things. And it's common now to hear young people say, like, I don't even, there's a lot of cynicism, I guess, is what I want to say. And young people will say, I can't even imagine being able to buy my own house, much less be able to have, kids. And yet your Twitter feed is a great, little blips of hope. And this is actually still a great place to raise a family. And it's totally doable. Tell us a little bit about that, because the book is so encouraging in that it tells these stories and allows people to paint a different picture, but it also is deeply respectful of those who, for whatever reason, can't have children or who are afraid in some way.
Yep. Yeah. And I'll say it here too, if you have anybody listening, is I almost always do. And I get emails from people who hear it and they're glad that I say it, which is, that it's such a huge cross, to not be able to have children or to not be able to have children now, like the people who want to and can't, not married, or they can't for some odd reason, they need to wait till later. It's a huge cross. So my heart goes out, and I would never want descriptions of the happiness of having children to cause pain. But it's an important thing, so we need to share it. But there's no, so that's what I always like to say, that because it's such a great heartache. Then your question was, right. Yes. Stories of like optimism. So number one, one of the things that really came out of the interviews, which I think it speaks to this point, it is hard and it is expensive. This is why, in a sense, like, I think ultimately the most important kind of family policy, well, there's two pieces of this, but this is why being interested in what causes prosperity is so important, right? Because actually, if you live in like a Venezuela or a place where we've like lost our focus of what we need to have a dynamic economic ecosystem, we will, like, ipso facto make it harder for people to have children and have families. And that's the purpose of the economy, is to serve these eternal ends, right? Because the economy doesn't last forever. But our families do. So yeah, I want to also just add that actually this is the reason not to study prosperity for its own sake, but because it's essential to this kind of flourishing. I want to add a piece to that, though, that the people across my sample, both wealthy and those that were sort of just going paycheck to paycheck without a lot of savings, one of the things I tried to paint was a contrast between this, I guess I would say, attitude of confidence in divine providence. So there's a kind of risk in having children, and it's similar to the risk that entrepreneurs take. And we know that an attitude of confidence in God's providence is actually a very important ingredient to the entrepreneurial mindset. Taking prudent risks and kind of, it's not like recklessness. You just assume everything will be fine, but there's a kind of, you tell God your plans and then, he can act. So we know that. So I think this, again, I found this a beautiful parallel between entrepreneurship and family building, that what you really want to encourage in young people is a willingness to take on prudent risks and to know that, kind of like in modern parlance, like, God has your back. And why does God have your back? Because God loves babies. God is going to do his best to provide for you. And so, again, not to be reckless, but that actually, like, if you save and you practice thrift, and your parents are supportive, you have supportive family and supportive church, there are so many success stories of people getting married, building families young. They're not necessarily rich in their 20s, but they're on a path. They're on a path to saving because they're oriented towards both this kind of virtue of moderation and thrift, but also this virtue of stepping out in faith and taking a bit of again, a prudent risk, which is prudent in light of what you know about God's providence.
That's beautiful. I think it's God is the great creator, and He created the first baby, and we in the true sense get to co-create with Him. He gives us the privilege, but then also to a lesser extent, He gives us the privilege to participate in the creation of the world through our work. On the one hand, through the family with the eternal creation, and with the business in the temporal world. But not to change the subject, but one of the things we love to do is to ask all of those who have conversations with us about what they are reading. And I'm really interested in asking you this question. It doesn't have to do business or so, but do you have a favorite book right now? What does Kathleen Pakaluk focus on in terms of her reading now?
That's a great question. And like anybody, there's ebb and flow. I would like it to be very consistent, but it hasn't been, especially this year. But what's on my nightstand right now, so something I try to read a few pages every night, I'm revisiting Solzhenitsyn's Cancer Ward. Sounds like kind of maybe a doubter of a choice. But actually, Solzhenitsyn is such a great author. And I read this book cover to cover with a lot of excitement, or just I loved it when I was backpacking around Europe, and as a kind of a stupid student when I was 20 years old, and was reading it when I first visited Auschwitz, and was meeting young students. This was in the 1990s, who had lived under the Soviet Union. So it was something that resonated with me, and I wanted to know more about it. So, but I remembered loving it, and I thought it's been a long time. So I picked that up again, and I'm finding it just as rich, and actually like seeing things I never noticed in it before. So Cancer Ward is really great. But for work right now, I'm reading through, for the first time, really cover to cover, Joseph Schumpeter's Capitalism and Democracy and Socialism. And it's such a triumph. It's a really, really interesting book, and it's hard to read. And I'm kind of reading with some upper level students, but we're all enjoying that a lot. So none of that was very light, I suppose. But I don't. Do I have any light reading? I want to pick up this book very soon called They Flew. I don't know if either of you has come across it. Carlos Aire. It's a book about these kind of stories from, it's a Yale University Press book. They Flew. It's kind of got a picture of a woman, kind of suspended in the air, but it investigates these stories of Christian, like, miracles of the impossible, and kind of what do we know historically about them.
Like levitation.
Yes, exactly. So that, I don't know if it's light reading. It was published by Yale Press, but that's something that's on my wish list. Is something I hope I could get to.
He's an author that I love, but I don't know that work at all.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. It's, I think it's his most recent one. And, everybody I meet, or everybody I know who finally gets around to reading it, says it's just spectacular. So
maybe what we do, Catherine, is when you read that, we're going to put you back on the schedule, and we'll hear all about it. But,
okay.
Before that, listen, I admire what you do. Thank you for the work you're doing to defend and elevate the human person and the family. You're the real deal. It's a privilege to be your friend and to have you on here. And I hope to have you back soon.
Yeah,
that's great.
And hopefully people will. This is a teaser, but hopefully people will buy and read the book, because it's really wise and gentle and hopeful. I'm going to hold it up for the camera. I don't know if that will work, because we're very high tech here, so I don't even know if that works, but it'll be in the liner notes. But before we go, Catherine, how can people find you?
That's a great question. I've just tried to reach out to people to get a proposal to build a real website for this book, because it's been, as you said, Andreas, a lot more widely read than I expected it to be. So people have suggested you need sort of like a book website that's kind of like one part book and one part movement. So hopefully that will happen in the next couple of months. But generally on X, I'm kind of not a really frequent poster, but every couple of days I try to post something on X. And
what's your handle
here
there?
At the Bush School at CR Pakaluk. So CRPAKALUK. Yeah. And
Thank you
at some
so
point,
much.
there'll be a link tree at some point with my, new fancy website, but not now.
Someday. Well, we'll put all of these things in our liner notes. Well, that will do it for today. Thanks once again, Catherine Pakaluk, for joining us. And friends, if you enjoyed this conversation, may we suggest that you subscribe to our podcast and give it a great review, and maybe share this episode with someone that you think will love it and love the message of it. Every little bit helps to persuade the gods of the algorithms that they should show this content to more and more people. So every little bit helps.
And I'm Andreas Widmer. I thank you for listening. And maybe some of you are watching this as well. That's a new feature. But we enjoyed this very much, Catherine. Thank you very much. And bye, everybody. Take care. Until next time, we hope you prosper.